All right, there he goes. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Going awesome. How you doing, man?
Oh, doing great. Great to have you on to start the day off with, one of our favorite plant medicines, the cannabis plant. It's happy 420 to you. We're down here live in Miami, so it's good to have you on.
Yeah, stoked to be here.
Excellent. And your talk today is going to be specifically on what? Just give us a little overview, Will.
I want to dive into how CBD and hemp is a catalyst for an awakening of consciousness and facilitating us in this ascension process, and how on multiple levels, from the physical inner ecology to the external ecology, how it's
Awesome.
really bridging us in the ascension process.
That's phenomenal. That's basically what spun me off into the CBD world, is finding about the endocannabinoid system, the CB1, CB2 receptors, firing your nervous, immune system, your brain function, and finding out CBDs come from your mother's breast milk. So we've all had CBDs, and that's the hidden secret that really big pharma and everyone doesn't want us to know about, the entourage effect, firing those synapses, perfect homeostasis. I'm sure you're going to go into that. So I'm aware of it and excited. It's really awesome information. So I'm really excited to see what you're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So I love that you're talking about the entourage effect, the need for standards and purity, as well as ensuring that the products people are taking they're getting what they think they're getting. And that's what inspired me to start the company back in 2014. I had a personal need for it and couldn't find anything that I wanted to take. So I wanted to launch a company that did third-party batch testing for heavy metals, VOCs, microbes, pesticides, herbicides, cannabinoids, and terpenes, and then post those results per batch so that people know exactly what they're getting every single time.
Exactly. And just, Will, I didn't give your background, so let me just give you a quick bio on you for people that don't know. You are founder and CEO of Ojai Energetics. I'm sure it's in Ojai, California. Will Clyden helps provide consumers with cutting-edge, science-driven, organic, nutraceutical, and medical food products from achieving optimal physical and spiritual health. And with Ojai Energetics, Will aims to provide the purest, healthiest, and most ethical produced CBD product on the market, and that provides people a viable key to living the most effective and healthiest life possible. And again, you're founder of Ojai Energetics. I'm sure you'll talk about that. But like you said, you've been helping people all over the planet coordinate sustainable festivals with 25 organizations. You're also based out of Ojai, and you're also one of the leading companies out there trying to make the mark with CBD and educate people, because once they get educated, the products sell themselves, especially if you have real products. And I'm sure you'll go into that. There's so much bad products in the market now. China flooding the market. Costa Rica, people are calling me, offering me, kilos of isolate, like no third-party testing, no sourcing the hemp. This is the stuff we really need to dial into so people understand. We already have a question here that says, my home state sells its own CBD oil and CBD vape. And my answer was, well, make sure you know where they're sourcing their hemp and you get third-party testing. So with that, I'll let you take over, and then when you're done with your talk, we'll engage a little bit with some more questions.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
Yeah, so when you're talking about isolate too, we can talk about the necessity of having a full spectrum and maintaining the holistic profile of the plant. We've been eating cannabinoids. So we've been eating cannabinoids in the full spectrum for thousands of years. It's one of the oldest domesticated plants, if not the first. And throughout our journey, as we've grown and developed in different stages, the cannabis plant has been there with us, facilitating and enabling these upgrades and shifts. So starting back 10,000 years ago, they found that's when it was beginning to be domesticated. And as we went from hunter-gatherer to more agricultural society, that brought along with it an increase of oxidative stress and more inputs from our living habits. And so one of the functions of the plant is that it nourishes our body's endocannabinoid system. So this system, named after the cannabis plant, its job is to regulate homeostatic balance for the entire body. So it's basically the most important system of our body, because its job is to make sure that every other system of the body is firing and functioning at the right time. We've got these cannabinoid receptors, CB1, CB2, that Jonah was talking about, and actually they're finding more cannabinoid receptors. And we're really just scratching the surface of understanding. But what we do know is that its job is to maintain that homeostatic balance, and it does that by multiple different mechanisms, one of which being buffering oxidative stress. So essentially, as we are exposed to the environment, the oxidation is kind of like cellular rust in a way, and it starts to break down and erode our bodies. And the job of the endocannabinoid system is to provide a force field and buffer that. And so we were eating CBD and full spectrum cannabinoids, whether we were making teas or smoking it or feeding it to one of the primary ways we got it in our body was also through feeding it to animals and then eating the animals. And back then the oxidative levels were dramatically less than where we're at today. And so you fast forward, the Scythians brought it throughout Europe and then to Rome, and the Romans brought it throughout Africa and the rest of Europe. And it kind of became a ubiquitous consumption and plant that was there with us as we went into the industrial era. Now that brought about a whole other boom and of oxidative stress, and people were consuming it, and it enabled us to transition and stay healthy through those. As we grow in society and more oxidation occurred, it was there helping us as a plant spirit ally by nourishing our endocannabinoid system. And not only that, it was providing fiber that's antimicrobial, antifungal, food sources, full protein profiles in the seeds of amino acids, one of the very few plants in nature that has actually a full amino acid profile, and a very perfect, near perfect balance of omega-3 to omega-6. So the plant provided us through on multiple levels, different facilitations for us to grow and expand in our consciousness as well as our society. And then you fast forward to the modern era, it was completely accepted and used in the United States and throughout the rest of the world until the 40s. Basically, what happened was, up until 1936, there wasn't an efficient way of making paper out of the hemp. The stock is super fibrous. And in 1936, the U.S. Department of Agriculture figured out how to make paper efficiently out of hemp stock and stem, and essentially would have completely disrupted and eliminated the need for forestry making paper. And so William Randolph Hearst, who owned majority of the lumber companies as well as the press, saw this as instead of adapting, saw this as a threat. And so basically put out a PR campaign focusing on the psychoactive elements of the cannabis plant, and using racism and xenophobia to push forward an agenda to all of a sudden make a plant that was considered one of the most staple plant of the society now demonized, and they were successful at that point by controlling the media. And so really it was the hemp plant, not the psychoactive varieties, that they were focusing on, and artificially pulled it out of our diet. At that point, we started to get an exponential increase of oxidative input as we moved into modernity. And we did so without our ally providing us the necessary nutrients that we relied on, which is a full spectrum, high CBD intake. And what ended up happening is now we're in the modern era. We have more oxidative stress than ever before, chronic oxidative stress, and we artificially created a nutrient deficiency in mass of endocannabinoid deficiency. And since the endocannabinoid system's job is to regulate every other system of the body in homeostatic balance, it was a 1-2 punch basically, with an exponential increase of oxidation simultaneously with the nutrient deficiency. We also saw the exponential uptick of various degenerative diseases. Now, most of these issues are actually nutrient deficiencies. They're endocannabinoid deficiencies. And just like if you cut out vitamin C from the diet, you get scurvy. It's no different with cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, where when you have endocannabinoid deficiency, you start to get breakdown. Now with this, because it regulates every system of the body, depending on the person's epigenetics and unique experience in the world, the systems will differ from person to person, ranging from cancers to Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, epilepsy. But when we put the cannabinoids back into the system and get the endocannabinoid system from an idle and back to full throttle, we start to see these issues reverse, and then also it's preventing them from occurring. So it really is the missing link for us as modern humans to thrive in this environment where we now have more chronic oxidative stress. They actually found that if we have to make a decision and choose over more than 7 choices, so go to the grocery store and there's more than 7 different options of the thing you're looking for, they've found that actually produces a notable oxidative stress response in the body. And that is the least of our stressors. And every time we get a oxidative stress, it actually increases this enzyme called FAAH, and the body burns up its internal cannabinoid anandamide, and the FAAH enzyme actually burns that up too. So we're with these chronic stressors, we're idling that system. And now when you take CBD, what it does, it works on multiple methods, and you always need a full spectrum, because CBD isolated by itself is kind of like using a celloist, versus with the full spectrum, it's the celloist and the symphony orchestra. They all interface with each other and synergize and create what's called the entourage effect. And so when we take a full spectrum CBD, it enables the body to actually increase its levels of anandamide, and that compound is a cannabinoid named after Ananda in Sanskrit for bliss. And so it's the bliss molecule, and it's a cannabinoid we produce, but we just don't produce enough of it. Just like we produce vitamin B in our body, we also have to have dietary intakes of B vitamins to have optimal levels. It's no different with endocannabinoids and phytocannabinoids. So when we get that back up online, all of a sudden we can handle and process the oxidative stress, and it actually buffers it. And not only that, what it does is it helps increase neurogenesis in the brain, and in one region in particular, which is exciting, and I want how it relates to the Ascension process and what we're facing in this unprecedented event of mass awakening through all the core fractals, is that increases neurogenesis in the corpus callosum. And so that region of the brain is what links the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And by increasing that brain function, it enables us to kind of transcend the duality nature of the two hemispheres. And it's also working on multiple layers, in that when the population gets the endocannabinoid system back up online, it's linking the eastern hemispheres where the cannabis plant emerged to the western, and enabling a transcendence and synthesis of collaboration, as opposed to being in the more fight or flight regions of the brain, which is a side effect of being endocannabinoid deficient. And so when the population begins to ramp up their endocannabinoid system, it actually brings them into the higher faculties and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which enables us to move out of the fight or flight and back into the higher faculties that sees things as interconnected and promotes a state of synergy consciousness. So you see things, instead of just the other and a threat, you now see things as interconnected. And so that's one of the ways, as the population is now, we're reintroducing this nutrient, it's going to facilitate an accelerated consciousness of symbiotic relating, as opposed to more fear-based parasitic like nature. And so that's something that's really exciting. That's already, the wave of it's already starting to expand and move out. And one of the ways that it's actually going to facilitate us as a plant spirit ally in emerging into the next level of consciousness. And just like I liken it to and I'm sure some of you have heard the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly. The caterpillar starts in the ecosystem as a a parasitic life form. It eats way more than its own body weight. It actually will go to almost collapse the keystone species of an ecosystem. And right before the systemic collapse, the beauty of nature takes over, and it goes into the chrysalis and breaks down into a mush. But it maintains the consciousness of consciousness and immune system of the caterpillar. And then these cells emerge called the imaginal cells, that are carrying the frequency of the next stage of the butterfly, essentially. And initially, the immune system recognizes them as a threat, sees them as an other, and begins to attack them and kill them, but they're persistent. And when they hit around 14%, which is the critical mass, all of a sudden the immune system of the caterpillar and the old cells go, hold on, this is actually a future version of myself, not a threat. At which point it then enables the imaginal cells to go in and recode them. And it kicks off an exponential catalyst event. And there's still rogue pockets, but the rapid recoding takes place, and eventually the entire system is transformed into a butterfly. And now when it emerges from the chrysalis, it is switched from a parasitic life form into a symbiotic life form, and a pollinator. And it actually goes from almost destroying an ecosystem to creating multiple ecosystems. And we are very, very similar in that as a species, is that we're emerging. We needed that. And the reason that the caterpillar was acting as the parasite was to amass all of this energy so that it could make this transformation and go out and actually build multiple ecosystems through pollination. And we're very similar in that as we've starting in more parasitic nature, we've generated all of this energy, and then through warfare, and satellites were developed, and now through the internet was developed from more of a parasitic consciousness. Now people are able to talk, and we can talk from all over the world, and we start to see on a physical level that many cultures had seen on a spiritual level of knowing the interconnectedness, but now everyone gets to see how we're all interconnected more than ever, and it's actually leading to an accelerated increase of symbiotic consciousness. And so I consider, to link it back to the hemp plant, hemp is like the imaginal cell food, if you will, of the awakening and the facilitation to rapidly recode the population to move us from a parasitic mindset into a symbiotic one. So we're really at the precipice of a massive unfolding of restructuring of the societies, and we've hit the critical mass. So what I find interesting is that the cannabis plant, I believe that plants have consciousness in them and their sentience. Had the cannabis plant not pulled itself into the underground via William Randolph Hearst, who many people saw as the enemy of cannabis, but in the beauty of the higher organizing principles was that because it was so ubiquitous in society at that point, if it did not get pulled into the underground root mass, essentially, we would have pharmaceutical, the rights of it would have been eroded. We would have all GMO hemp, Monsanto controlled, all in the pharmaceutical realm. And the beauty is that by it going into the underground, it emerged at this point with the internet, where now, if the cat's out of the bag, the population will not stand for it going to pharmaceutical only, and no one's going to want to smoke or eat a GMO bud from Monsanto. And so there was really a beautiful timing in that now it cannot be taken away because the consciousness is so spread, and the people will not allow for that to be taken away. So we're now seeing more and more people becoming aware of CBD, and education is critical of what it is. And the FDA got pressured from pharmaceuticals to try and make it a drug only. But the issue with that is that if you're a healthy human, you still need CBD and full spectrum CBD to stay healthy. And essentially, now if they try and, it would be akin to saying you can't have vitamin C until you're sick with scurvy, and then once you're sick, we'll write you a script for vitamin C. So I'm working with the Hemp Industries Association and the American Herbal Products Association. We're developing a PSA with different celebrities to further educate people on how necessary it is to stay as a food intake. And what's likely going to happen is that the 99% crystallate CBD, which really doesn't work well at all, will go to the pharmaceutical realm, but the hemp source of CBD will remain in the food supply and the supplement supply as it should. So it's really exciting. Another element which is beautiful, and seeing how the as above so below of this plant, how it bridges things together. I consider CBD like the bridge molecule as well, in that it enables us to ground and synthesize data and be able to adapt and thrive in this environment while simultaneously activating flow state. Biochemically, flow state is an uptick of anandamide along with different levels of serotonin and dopamine. And when we intake the cannabinoids, we actually can get into flow state much, much more rapidly. And so with the population entering flow state and being open to more synchronicities around that, we're going to see this rapid unfolding of growth and transition into the more symbiotic culture. And another way that's interesting is, you look, there's a lot of bipartisan support over the hemp plant, and it's bridging these paradigms. And we've got people like Mitch McConnell, who's a major proponent of hemp. He's actually one of the biggest producers of CBD in Kentucky, and Democrats and Republicans are getting together, and they actually just petitioned the DEA, because what happened was that the Farm Bill enabled us to grow hemp domestically, and completely classified it as not on the controlled substances list. There's a lot of misinformation going around saying the DEA made CBD from hemp illegal, which is not the case at all. And so they actually petitioned them and told them to piss off, essentially, that the CBD for nutraceutical is needed and a viable source. Nowhere in the Farm Bill does it stipulate that it can't be used for nutraceutical profiles. And then they also passed a bill saying that no federal agency can block the interstate commerce of hemp or any of its derivatives grown under the Farm Bill. So we're seeing how this plant is facilitating a movement on all fronts of bridging together different paradigms and moving forward as a unifying force. And so that's one of the many ways how it's a necessary part of the shift of consciousness that we're seeing. And so not only that, we're able to take the waste product, quote unquote, from our production from the oil, and turn it into concrete replacement that is carbon sequestering, bulletproof, fireproof, waterproof, antifungal. It's actually a breathable living structure, unlike a concrete, which is a dead house basically, and enables in the walls that actually will filter the air quality while sinking CO2 and providing a basically free or significantly less expensive living structure. So part of my passion when I started this was to create a vehicle for the Ascension process that could catalyze and pipeline energy and capital to various different projects for working on solution-based systems, from eco-villages to utilizing Wi-Fi that's bioharmonic as opposed to poison and detrimental frequencies to our resonance field in nature, and so one of the ways we're doing this is we're going to be pipelining the hempcrete abilities and working on 3D printing hemp houses so we can decentralize that model, open source the system, and provide extremely, the goal is to transition out of the current economic model that we're currently in into one where all the needs are met and we're living in a symbiotic abundance and like Jose Arguelles has talked about how time becomes art. So we're part of that movement, and hemp is a vital piece of that. Another thing that we can make out of the byproduct is a graphene equivalent or supercapacitors. So we've built out IP on the use of that for different systems, and we're going to be able to create electric cars, rockets, jets using hemp as the battery storage source, which is super exciting. So we're taking care of the external ecosystems while simultaneously facilitating the zone zero of your internal ecology and getting that back into homeostatic balance. And it's really, really profound what's unfolding. And it's been a real blessing to be able to be part of that and watch the vehicle expand and impact. We're going to be the first biodynamic certified CBD source domestically. It's going to happen. We've got the farm. We're building full polyculture systems and getting seeds in the ground early next month. And so Jonah was talking about the need for education and quality of products. Actually, I'm going to reach out and talk about getting us as part of the Hemp and Heal platform. I love what they're doing. One of the things is like you touched on, is purity as well as standardization of concentration. There's a lot of people trying to jump in, not in integrity, just trying to make money off of this and selling poor quality products that didn't even have CBD, or Chinese hemp that was filled with heavy metals. And so that was what inspired me to start it, was to create a product that I wanted to take back in 2014 that I would feel safe taking and giving to others. And so we were the first company that did third-party batch testing and posted the batch results per batch. So you could see exactly what you're getting every time. I formulated it so it was gluten-free, corn-free, soy-free. Everything we use is certified organic, or the hemp that we use, we're going to be using our biodynamic certified, but until then is organically grown and third-party batch tested to ensure that it's free of heavy metals and pesticides and herbicides. And so every ingredient is or either certified organic or organically verified, grown or to higher standards. And on top of that, what we did is the issue with CBD is one, right now, due to the newness of the market, it's kind of inflated in price, and it's, as more and more growers, there's farms popping up globally, the price is inevitably going to go down and become more affordable. But one of the issues is bioavailability of the cannabinoids. So a full spectrum extract is notably more bioavailable than an isolate, but even at the full spectrum level, it's still poor in its absorption ability. Around 90% of the CBD and cannabinoids that you eat are destroyed by the liver and the stomach acid before it even makes it into the blood. So if you eat 20 milligrams of CBD with a regular CBD oil, you're actually only getting 2 milligrams in your bloodstream, but you're paying for 100%. And so I found a chemist through synchronicity. He had figured out how to make it water soluble. And I said, okay, well, is it certified organic? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, well, if we're going to be improving bioavailability and solubility, we need to figure out how we can do this by using only certified organic ingredients to make that happen. And so we did, and patented that process. And so we're the only company that can make a full spectrum cannabis oil water soluble without using any synthetics or synthetically modified compounds. And the reason that is important is to not use synthetics is when you start to improve the bioavailability, especially by making it water soluble, you're kind of bypassing your body's filter system. And basically, if we eat a synthetically modified compound or a synthetic, the body will do its best to filter it out before it allows it into the bloodstream. And so our bodies have a gatekeeper to prevent fats from getting into the blood, because once they're in the blood, they can travel wherever they want to go through the body. And so we have this water layer over our mucosa membrane of our mouth and all the way into our gut and stomach and digestive tract and stomach. And essentially the fats can't make it through the water. Oil and water don't mix. And so it sits in the stomach. And that's when the body would start analyzing it and seeing what it wants to allow in and tries to prevent the synthetics from getting out, from getting in and filtering them out. When you get to water soluble and at the smaller scale, now all of a sudden you're bypassing that system, and the body cannot filter out the synthetically modified compounds or synthetics, and you've got a major issue, especially for long-term use. There are some companies who are improving the solubility, but they're using either synthetically modified lecithins, which when you tweak the compound, it changes the spin of the electrons, and they're called left-handed ligands, right-handed ligands. Our bodies tend to prefer left-handed ligands, but it's not always the case. Cannabinoids are left-handed ligands, as are terpenes. And so when you tweak the compound, it switches the spin and makes it less biocompatible and actually can create oxidative stress inside the body. So if you take the lecithin and you've tweaked it and isolated it and use solvents to change it, you're getting that. The body would normally filter it out, but by making it at the nanoscale, it's going to get into the blood, and not only the blood, it's going to penetrate the cellular tissue, and that's where you start to see problems. There's another company making, and that's a major concern. If we're putting synthetics and synthetically tweaked compounds and loading that into our cellular tissue, and the body can't break it down properly, you're going to start getting these systemic blockages at a cellular level, which is the opposite of what we want in this for optimal health. And there's another company that is using the nanotechnology. It's a liposome using polyethylene glycol. Now PEG, and they're calling it tocopherolin, which is a vitamin E compound essentially connected to the PEG molecule. And so it's a little bit of greenwashing, but it's 100%. The vitamin E is not synthetic, but the PEG is made out of petroleum. It is composed of ethylene glycol molecules from petroleum, and multiple of those. It's polyethylene glycol, and the ethylene glycol is what is antifreeze. And so basically they're nanosizing this plastic, encapsulating the oil in that, bypassing the filter system. And not only are you getting it in your blood, you're getting it into your cellular tissue, and it's loading in there. And so for long-term usage, nanopegging has never been studied. They've shown studies for short-term usage with minimal adverse reactions, because the oxidation is going to be at small amounts, limited. It's still not preferable. I don't think most people want to have nanoplastics shoved into their cellular tissue. But the issue is long-term use, as it begins to bioaccumulate and can throw off multiple complex mechanisms like the methylation pathways, and then eventually it will degrade in the body and turn into multiple different forms of plastic derivatives, and really start to screw things up. So it's really important to look at what you're getting with the products. I just spoke to a PhD in nanoparticle toxicity yesterday, who is deeply concerned about the nanopeg for long-term use, and multiple other doctors as well, or any nano scale stuff that is using synthetics. It's really important, if you're going to bypass that system, to use only certified organic or fully holistic compounds that are free of contaminants, because the body then knows what to do with them. It would let it in normally, and it can break it down into amino acids and use it for cellular repair, etc. And so I wanted to show you, so there's a glass of, so the water is the gatekeeper of the body. A regular CBD can't make it through. And so with oil and water, I just put one in, you'll see it floating. And that's what it does in our gut. And so it takes about 30 minutes for the body to actually create nanoparticles of it in the gut using the bile, and it will emulsify it into nanoparticles and then let it in. And so what we figured out how to do is, and this is us, is do that outside the body just using organic compounds. And ours blends in perfectly. It goes straight into water. You can see the regular CBD oil floating at the top, but our oil goes in perfectly. And that's why you can feel with our CBD, it gets immediately absorbed because we actually encapsulate it in nano bubbles of water, and your body uptakes it immediately. So we can get massive bioavailability increases, which makes it significantly more affordable. Milligram for milligram, our 250 is the equivalent of at least 2,500 milligrams of a regular CBD, which people pay around up to $300. Ours is at 75. And not only is it the most affordable and bioavailable, ours kicks in about a minute to 5 minutes. So you have immediate results, especially important for people with anxiety or other more severe endocannabinoid deficiencies, where you don't want to wait 30 minutes to get the benefits and have to take way more of it. You can take less and get the results on the spot. And another thing that's fascinating is that with the bioavailability and the instant absorption, what we found is that the oil will actually change. There's multiple bell curves of efficacy of CBD. And so that means that there's a sweet spot, multiple sweet spots of dosages for your body for that day. And if you take too much, it actually becomes less effective, and then you have to go to the next peak to get the ideal dosage again. Now the issue is that because the endocannabinoid system is buffering oxidative stress in our day-to-day life, some days are more stressful than others, that bell curve is actually shifting left and right, and we don't know where it's at. So with a regular CBD, you're shooting in the dark to get that perfect dose for your body. But what we found with our doctors that we're working with is that the CBD will actually, because of the instant absorption, the CB2 receptors will light up and change when you're approaching the perfect dose, because it's instantly absorbed, and it will go from more of an herbally bitter taste to 100% sweet like honey when you get the perfect dose for your body for that day. And I love that that's kind of like a cosmic Easter egg, is that the sweet spot's literally sweet. If you go past the sweet spot, it will start to turn back to bitter again, until you get to the next sweet spot, where it will go 100% sweet like honey. So this way, with this innovation, and our tagline is and beyond that is one of our grounding principles, and is ancient roots and modern innovation. So this is one of the oldest plants that we've worked with, and now we're innovating it, but we're not ever moving from the roots and the truth of where we're grounded in, by using synthetics. We're only using whole plant therapeutics to take it to the next level. And so you can dial in with this technology the perfect dose for your body for that day, just using your taste buds alone, and which is pretty awesome. It really gives the user, it helps people find their own inner sovereignty, knowing their body is the best healer, and they get to, their body will tell them when they're getting what it needs, which is a lot more empowering than someone prescribing a dosage protocol from an external source. So that's just one of the many amazing things that the hemp plant is bringing us. And I'd love to answer any questions people have.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Will, for that. I know one of the first questions that for myself has been very difficult to, a lot of people ask this. What are the legalities? I know, as far as I know, if you extract from marijuana, it's in the gray area as being illegal. If it's from hemp or industrial hemp and it's imported from out of the country, then that falls under the Farmers Act and the Hemp Act, and that is cool. What's your take on that? What do you know? It's such a gray area, and it's so many people ask me. I'm sure they ask you a lot too. What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, great question. So basically, hemp is a legal definition. It's not a botanical definition, right? There's some varieties there's variants in every plant, but they're actually not cousins. It's not the male plant versus female plant. They're not different species. It was arbitrarily created in Canada by a doctor who countries wanted to use it for industrial purposes. And they said, okay, let's just draw the line arbitrarily at 0.3% THC or less. That's legally hemp. And anything above 0.3, that's legally marijuana. And you even stated this is an arbitrary line in the sand. There's really no botanical difference. And so the legalities of it in the CSA, which was written before THC was discovered as a compound and before they knew what was psychoactive in it, they just called it the resin. They exempted the stalks, the stems, the oil, the hemp seeds, the hemp seed oil. So they distinguish between oil and hemp seed oil, which is important, and said that these parts of the plant are, as long as it's a hemp plant, are exempt from the Controlled Substances Act. And then in the exemption, there was an exemption saying that the resin is not exempt. But what they meant by resin was psychoactive concentrations of THC. And that was stipulated by a federal judge in HIA versus DEA, which was spearheaded by my friend David Bronner, who Neil was talking about. And they basically, the DEA was trying to say, oh, there's trace amounts of THC in hemp seed oil, therefore it's a controlled substance. They sued them and said, no, this is exempt. And so that case went to federal court. The DEA lost, and they explicitly said that any cannabinoids, as long as it's derived from the exempt part, are not controlled. Now, if you want to go and schedule it, you can. They obviously, it wouldn't pass through Congress, so they let it go. So that was kind of the opening. That landmark case enabled companies to import it and bring it in, because at that point you couldn't grow domestic hemp legally at a federal level. So you had to go to other countries and use the stock and stem only to be able to get it into the country. That was back in 2014. Then the Farm Bill passed, and it redefined hemp as the entire cannabis plant, including the flowers, for domestic production, but it's only through the it's only legal if it's part grown under the Farm Bill in the country. So the Farm Bill doesn't apply to European hemp. It only applies to domestic hemp, and part of that program is you have to work with a university for studies to get it under that classification. So if someone went and grew hemp in their backyard and the THC was below 0.3, if it's not under the Farm Bill, that would be considered by the DEA and legally a controlled substance, which is ridiculous. And we're working to shift that. And so if you use flowers from Europe currently, that would be still a controlled substance. So there has to be, if you're doing non-domestic hemp, it has to be stock and stem only. If it's domestic hemp, it can be under the Farm Bill, and it can be the entire plant, flowers included. Now, the body doesn't care if you're getting it from the stock and the stem or the flowers. What it does care is that there's a full spectrum of cannabinoids and terpenes and phytonutrients, so like CBC, CBG, CBDA, THC, THCA. You just need it takes a lot more of the stock and stem to get that concentration than the flower. So it's more affordable to use the flowering parts than the stalk and stem, but the body doesn't care which part it's coming from. So yes, if it's grown under the Farm Bill, another bill got passed, pushed through by Mitch McConnell, that states that no federal agency can block the interstate commerce of any hemp product and derivative grown under the Farm Bill. So that actually created a much stronger legal clarity that no federal agency, FDA, DEA, anyone at a federal level can block CBD from being sold if it's grown from CBD under the Farm Bill. Now, the stock and stem is still protected because it's part of the exemption. It's not a controlled substance, but it's less clear. So, yeah, that help?
Got it. We also had a couple questions come in here. So can you talk about CBD specifically with cancer? I know there's a patent that the U.S. has on CBDs and cancer, so I'm sure you could talk a lot about how does it actually interact with cancer? How does it work with cancer? That was basically the question. Can you go into cancer specifically? How does CBDs, full spectrum cannabinoids, work with cancer?
Awesome. Yeah. So basically, for the first 9 months in utero, we were cancer cells. And so cancer cells are cells that are just rapidly growing. Now, the issue is when they start to go out of place is when we see what we call cancer now, is that they're not in the right place and they're miscoded. And so the endocannabinoid system's job is to regulate homeostasis from the nerve cells to all cellular structuring and positioning in the body. And essentially, with a depleted endocannabinoid system that we have as modern humans until now, since we're taking CBD again, that's shifting, is that the conductor can't guide the cells properly. And so that's what leads to, in many cases, cancer growth. Now, what's fascinating is that the cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system will actually initially try and recode the cells and get them to go to the right place. And so it's not just going in and killing them. It's actually trying to interface with them and say, hey, you're not in the right spot. Let's synergize and move you somewhere else. Which I think is a beautiful metaphor of the consciousness level that we're moving into en masse. But if that cell resists and refuses to be recoded, then it will go in and do apoptosis and blow it up. So that is kind of how it works in the body. Different types of cancers respond to different levels of, some cancers need a high THC. Other cancers like CBD and breast cancer, particular types of brain cancers respond to high CBD, low THC. So there's a fair amount of misinformation saying that you just need only high THC for it to work. It's not true. It depends on and nor is all high CBD, low THC the right mechanism for certain types of cancers. So more research is being done, and for instance, like a prostate cancer, you need to do a high dose of CBD, low THC, until the PSA levels drop below 4. Once it drops below 4, the person finishes it with a high THC, and that's what knocks it out.
Awesome. Great answer for that, because there is a lot of confusion when you do that. And if you read the government patent, I know there's 2 of them that I'm aware of. There's one specifically on cannabinoids and cancer, not only just in prevention, but also in the reversal and treatment and cure of it. Again, firing those receptors, creating the entourage effect. So it's just so fascinating how much information there is out there. People just actually Google and look and check for it. There's a ton of information. I keep finding new reports. The Washington State University, they've done a lot of studies on it. Even the government's done human test trials where they dose 700 milligrams a day or at once with somebody and found no toxicity. The body just absorbed it. So again, the endocannabinoid system were genetically designed for cannabis. So happy 420. But another question. So you talked about cancer, and that's great you clarified that, because people do get confused with the different variations of cancer, and there are some cancers you could treat with just CBDs with low THC, like you said, and some with high. So that's great that you brought that up, because I get asked that all the time. Let's see. There is academic debate over how many people should be considered dependent on marijuana, but a national epidemiological study put the rate at about 9% of users. Is that true? Do you know anything about that are dependent upon marijuana?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing, marijuana was a term that was a misnomer. It was part of the propaganda campaign because they shifted it, but they were focusing on Mexican immigrants' use of cannabinoids and cannabis, higher THC, and labeled it from cannabis to marijuana. So we call it marijuana, but really it's only cannabis, sativa, or indica and sativa. We can dive into that later, but basically it's all really cannabis plant. But what they're talking about tends to be high THC. The dependencies, there's definitely, you can have a psychological dependency to anything. And so I'm sure there are people who become habitualized and have fixed action programs that psychologically addict them to cannabis, high THC. But no, there's no physical addiction that exists for cannabinoids. Now, what's interesting is that THC, I see it more of like a scalpel, in that it's a single directional effect in the body for the most part. And what it does is it binds to the CD1 receptors of the brain, which is what anandamide binds to naturally. So anandamide is the cannabinoid we produce in our bodies, and we need the high CBD intake to boost those levels. But the THC binds and blocks the anandamide from targeting that receptor. Now, before we had chronic endocannabinoid deficiency, having that binding take place, and there was plenty of anandamide in the blood, it didn't really throw our systems out of homeostatic balance anywhere near the way it does today. So if people are taking high THC without CBD, the issue is that since we're already deficient in the anandamide targeting those receptors, we're further throwing the system slightly out of balance. Now, if you couple that with an intake of CBD and it reboosts the anandamide levels, it will recalibrate the system and bring us back into the homeostatic balance. So high THC cannabis without CBD is now impacting us more detrimentally than it used to before we had the mass endocannabinoid deficiency, but it can be countered with the CBD intake to bring the system back into homeostatic balance. And so that will definitely shift by the issue of the psychological dependency, because CBD actually has been found, and again, full spectrum, there's a double-blind study using CBD and for tobacco users, and they found that it decreased the tobacco usage by 40%. And then the studier actually found that the CBD seemed to be atrophying the neural networks associated with environmental stimuli created addictive behavior, which is huge. And so it makes sense because the endocannabinoid system is regulating homeostasis. It's in the physical systems of the body, and not only that, it's in the brain. And so anytime we have an addiction, it's essentially a fixed action program that worked in one moment. There was some traumatic event around it, and it locked into place and said, this is a steady state action. And so what worked in one moment may not be good, and most of the time isn't good outside of that moment, but the unconscious mind locks it in. Gabor Mate is an excellent researcher on addiction in fixed action states, but the implications of with CBD in the endocannabinoid system is by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, it actually creates a bridge between the conscious mind and unconscious, enabling for repatterning of traumatic imprinting rapidly, and communication between your conscious self and your unconscious fixed action programs. And not only that, they're finding that it will actually do neural trimming of neural networks that are not in homeostasis for your system and your life. So there's a huge amount of research. We're actually partnering with a guy in Florida, a leading addiction specialist. He's going to be bringing our products into his practice and further researching how a healthy endocannabinoid system is extremely effective at combating addiction. And so we're going to see more with the population re-nourishing their system. That percentage, I haven't seen that study, of dependency is going to dramatically shift. So that's another way that CBD helps us. And it's really profound how many people ask me, like, what doesn't it do? And I used to joke that if you've got a broken bone, it's not going to help you. This is at the very beginning of my research. And then my friend sent me a study showing that it actually increases bone repair by 3 times the speed. And now we've got a leading orthopedic surgeon on our team who's going to be going out to the orthopedic world and shifting them from opiate scripts to also integrating it into their practice for repair, which is huge. So the reason why CBD does so many things is it's feeding the system that whose primary job is to maintain balance and make sure every other system of the body is working properly. And that includes the neural networks associated with addiction.
That's amazing you just said that, because I just found that out myself like 2 days ago. Someone asked me on an email, does it help with like fractured, like the broken bones? And I was like, I used to say the same thing. Well, if you break your arm in half, it's not going to fix a broken arm, or if you broke your neck. But then I actually did some Googling and research, and I saw that it actually does help with bone repair. And if you have pinched nerves or discs and fractured discs, it's amazing.
Yeah, because there's receptors in the fascia and the nerves and the skeletal system. So by going in there, it recodes and makes sure that the breaks will repair faster. And for nerve damage, it will actually regrow nerves. So we've had people where one guy couldn't feel his foot for 10 years. It was diabetic related nerve damage, and got the sweet spot. And in a minute, he goes, "Oh my God, I can feel my foot." So it's really profound, the diversity. And yeah, with bone breaks, it's funny that you have the same metaphor.
Same metaphor. And we get testimonials all the time from people because it acts so quickly. It's very, like you said, profound how quickly CBD interacts and actually affects the body, literally within seconds or minutes sometimes.
Yeah, if you're vaping CBD, then you can get it, or people who are doing dabs of it, if you want to make sure it's clean. Yeah, then it can get into the body immediately. Edibles biochemically do not enter the body until 30 minutes. Some people even up to 2 hours. So now with people who are sensitive and more in the crystalline consciousness, they can feel the morphic field response, but biochemically it's not actually in the blood until about 30 minutes, unless you are improving the bioavailability, like with ours, where we embed it in the water molecule itself. It's the hydrosome, not a liposome, which is bigger and it's still fat encapsulated. With the hydrosome, it literally, the second that it touches your mouth, your body absorbs it like it's water. So when we won Best CBD at HempCon Cup, the dab hatter from High Times goes, "You just created an edible that hits like a dab." And so, yes, and that's where vaping is if you're not using the water soluble formulation, is an effective way of getting an immediate response.
Yeah, I was at the Emerald Cup, the Cannabis Cup, a few months ago, and the best thing I smoked there, honestly, was dabbing pure CBD, 100%. I got this amazing calmness over my body, zen-like, and I went back and tried it 3 more times. And between the isolate and the cartridges, I smoked 200 milligrams of pure water-soluble CBD. My intake of cannabis myself and marijuana has gone down extremely. And this month I had 3 people call me that told me they had totally stopped smoking marijuana just by smoking the crystal isolate and cartridges with CBD. So it's amazing, even for myself.
Yeah. Now do your cartridges, do they have terpenes and other cannabinoids in them?
So we do have some we carry that do have a natural, organic, extracted terpenes. The main company we deal with is an all organic product from hemp all the way down to the terpenes they use. Some products do carry VG and PG and stuff like that. We don't carry anything like that. We only carry nano extracted or water soluble products. If it's not water soluble, if it's not nano extracted, your body's not going to absorb it 100%. A lot of the products, as you know, out there are not like that. So the bio delivery availability is really, important, whether it's a coconut oil or, attached to the liptoids, the fatty cells. The bioavailability is really where it's at in terms of product wise. So the vape ones I use are these 200 milligram ones that we carry. And we also have isolate from Empire, which was voted #1 at the Cannabis Cup for best tasting. They actually take the flavored terpenes out of Cannabis Cup winners and put it in the CBD isolate. So there's no THC, but you get the flavor of, purple jack or, whatever type of, cannabis you like. So I've been myself using that, and it's phenomenal, just the tone you get. And we have so many elderly people using the isolate now, the crystal isolate. It's hysterical, but they love it. I mean, actually, after their first exhale, within 10 seconds, your stress, your anxiety, pain just drops dramatically. Yeah. And it's potent stuff. It's 1,000 milligrams per gram. So, you're taking a nice hit of 10, 20 milligrams.
To have the terpenes too, because when the isolate by itself, it really doesn't make it. The way that the full spectrum interfaces with our endocannabinoid system is through indirect and direct agonizing of different receptors. And so the timing is kind of perfect the way that the plant designed it. And so the trace amounts of THC will stimulate the CB1, and then the anandamide will come in and overtake it. But then the terpenes are vital too, because they'll actually direct the cannabinoids. So that's where, if you have the isolate and then adding the terpenes in, is definitely, it's going to give a much more notable, diverse health response than just an isolated CBD without the terps. It's pretty amazing what we're getting to. Dr. Michelle Sexton, who's the leading terpene expert in cannabis science, I had started to find that we could use terpenes from essential oils to direct the cannabinoids in the body to the systems that we want them to go to. And I called her up and said, hey, I'm getting that terpenes are actually bioretters for the cannabinoids. And she goes, well, that's exactly the research that we're getting. And so basically you can direct the way that the CBD is going to target, just like the difference between an OG Kush and a Jack Herrera, not so much indica sativa, that's more of a man-made definition, but the terpene difference is what changes your experience with the cannabis. And so by using terpenes, they actually kind of act like little tugboats, and they'll direct the cannabinoids to the receptor sites that the terpenes have an affinity towards. So if you have a vape with more pinene, it's going to be more mental clarity, cognition. It's going to direct the cannabinoids to the brain more, as well as the vanilloid receptors for inflammation, versus a more citrusy note is going to target them into the digestive tract, as well as for mood boosting and euphoria. So, and that's what's with the water soluble key is, like, when you can use the absorption and get it into the blood immediately, you can use the terpenes by using blends. We've got 22 blends that we've tested that are harmonically balanced, which is key too, because if you put the different notes and they're not resonant, then you get dissonance. So we've got these in resonance.
That's awesome.
You can smell it and then hold the CBD and get the sweet spot, and then basically custom create cannabis strains or effects on the spot, just using an inhalation of the essential oil, which is the most effective way to get it into the blood. And the timing's right with the water encapsulated, because it's immediate absorption, that you now can custom create these blends for thyroid or sleep or digestion or inflammation. So it's really exciting what's happening.
Wow, that is, and it's so good you brought that up, because terpenes are a big factor that really not too many people know about. But I love showing this graph. I know you've seen it. CBD just dominating, when it comes to ailments and stuff like that. It's really 40% of the 113 cannabinoids. CBD is the dominant medicinal one. Everyone thinks of THC, another great graph. You know, CBD again just dominating it. You know, where THC has 4. So I know THC is a lot popular for its psychoactiveness, but when you talk about real full spectrum plant medicine, CBD is the dominant one, and THC being very helpful, of course, like you explained throughout your talk. But just want to say thank you again. And before you go, give out your information for everybody listening, your website. And
yeah, so check us out, OJAI, O-J-A-I Energetics, ENERGETICS. You can order us online, ship to all 50 states. And if you're in the LA area, Cafe Gratitude is using us in their cocktails and their drinks. We've got different top chefs, Michelin chefs, infusing us into their foods. So if you're in the LA area, Spring Restaurant or Shibumi or Cafe Gratitudes, and we are spreading globally. So also we have a program where we guarantee access no matter what to anyone. So if they can't afford it, we're already the most affordable and the only one that's making water soluble without using synthetics, which is critical for safety. If you can't afford it, we make sure that you get access at any price you can afford. If you can't pay anything, we still make sure you get access to it. And all you need to do is email us, and we'll take care of you. So it's been a pleasure. And Jonah, thank you for doing what you're doing. It's critical to spread the word and educate and bless people up. And I look forward to talking to you further.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again. And education is the key, because once people learn about the endocannabinoid system and the entourage effect, like you said, what doesn't it cure? It puts the body in perfect homeostasis. So when you're talking about plant medicines, to me, cannabis is the most important one out of the plant kingdom, and ayahuasca and everything else is great, but adding those other botanical terpenes in it is just energizing the actual, interactivity with our bodies. It's amazing stuff. I've been fascinated this last year and learning about all this, and I could tell in your presentation you are as well. And at the end of the day, we're really helping people get the strongest medicine to heal themselves of a very chemical environment we live in. So great talk today. Thanks again. And definitely check out your website. And there's the planes flying overhead because we're downtown Miami, and we're live at the Agua Cabo Lounge here in Miami, Florida for a 420 event. And we have some DJs and reggae music later. So it's going to be fun. But again, thank you again for all your service and your work.